Good morning. Calling to order the December 8th Lee County LPA meeting. Publications.
Morning, Joe Adams with the County Attorney's Office. I have reviewed the affidavit publication and find it legally sufficient.
Mr. Adams, if you'll all rise, pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. This is a public forum. If there is an item not on the agenda that someone from the public wishes to speak to, now is the time. Seeing none. Moving into agenda item number 3, October minutes. Has the LPA reviewed those, and do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the statement.
I second.
Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Agenda item 4A, Land Development Code amendments. Fire EMS impact fee amendments to Chapter 2 to incorporate changes to fire EMS impact fees based on fire and impact fee update study prepared by Bench, dated September 29, 2025. These are county initiated. Would the county like to lead this?
Yeah, good morning. We have 3 separate LDC amendments here this morning. The first one will be presented by our consultant, Vinesh, who has worked on that with us. The second 2 will be addressed by staff. Just as a reminder, Section 34-115 of the Land Development Code provides that the local planning agency's role in reviewing amendments to the Land Development Code is to make recommendations to the Board of County Commissioners as to the consistency of the proposal with the adopted comprehensive plan. With that, I'll turn it over to Nilgun, who can start the presentation.
Good morning. I'm Nilgun Kemp with Benish. We have a brief presentation that starts a little bit with the background review and gets into the technical study and then the next steps. So as you know, Lee County is a large county with about 836,000 population, and it also ranks first out of all Florida counties in terms of residential permitting, meaning you are a fast-growing county, and that puts some pressure on the facilities and services. The impact fees for EMS and fire services were last updated in 2018, and this study is updating all these figures and has about 16 providers in the case of fire rescue. The purpose is, again, to reflect the most current data. That's also one of the legal requirements for impact fees. And impact fees, by definition, are a one-time capital charge to new development. It covers the cost of new capital facilities, so they cannot be used for maintenance or operations, but they do free up general tax dollars, so they indirectly help those programs. They help implement the capital improvement plans. Their main purpose is to maintain the level of service. They calculate the cost of growth, and they are most needed when there are high growth levels and limited alternative funding. Impact fees in Florida were governed by case law throughout the 80s, and then in 2006, we had the Impact Fee Act passed. Since then, it had multiple changes. Some of its key requirements are that the fees be based on most recent and localized data, and recently, the legislation defined recent as data available within the past 4 years. There's a minimum of 90-day notice requirement for any increases after adoption. And if there's any challenge to the fee, the government now has the burden of proof. They basically need to show that their fees are correct. It used to be the other way around. In 2021, we had the House bill passed that put some limits on fee increases and also how those increases need to be phased. So it basically requires that any increase up to 25% should be phased over 2 years, any increase between 25 and 50% over 4 years, and they cannot be increased more than 50%. They cannot be increased more than once every 4 years. There's an exception clause that basically requires that if the local government shows that there are extraordinary circumstances and 2/3 of the governing body votes for it, it could be more than 50%. At this time, Lee County has no intention of using this exception clause. It's is staying with the 50% increase. Last year, we had another Senate Bill 1080, not 180, 1080 pass, and that basically made it a little harder to use the extraordinary circumstances clause, and those new changes will be effective in January. And again, the county doesn't have any intention of using this option. So the technical study uses a consumption-based methodology, which is very common in Florida. It's also your adopted methodology. It charges new growth for the value of the fire EMS infrastructure that it's using. And the way it's calculated, it ensures that new development is not being charged for any existing deficiencies. That's one of the legal requirements. So the formula for it starts with calculating the cost to add capacity. So that's the value of the stations, other buildings, vehicles, equipment, and so forth. From that, it subtracts any revenues being contributed through other sources by the future development. So to the extent that providers are using taxes and other sources, a portion will come from new development, and we want to subtract that so we are not charging new growth twice, once through the fee and once through the tax. Then that net cost gets multiplied by demand, which is measured in terms of population. The fee has several components. It looks at the inventory of the facilities, service area, level of service, the value of that inventory under the cost component, and other revenue sources that are being contributed through other, other taxes and so forth under the credit component. And then the demand component takes that cost and distributes among different land uses. So I will go over just the EMS calculations just to give you a sense how the calculations are prepared, and then we'll just show you the summary tables for fire fees. So EMS inventory includes 12 county-owned stations. It's about 42,000 square foot, 25 acres of land. The county also has 29 lease stations, but we do not include them since leases are operational expense. We only include the owned stations in the calculations. Also, we are including vehicles and equipment. In all cases, the unit costs are estimated based on any recent construction or upcoming estimates or bids for upcoming construction, supplemented by insurance values of the buildings and data from other jurisdictions for similar facilities. And land is similarly estimated based on any recent purchases or appraisals or estimates for upcoming purchases, and then looking at vacant land sales throughout the service area for similar sized parcels. So with that, in the case of EMS, the EMS stations were estimated at $600 per square foot, sport buildings at $300 per square foot, and land at $350,000 per acre. For impact fee purposes, we are measuring level of service as population per station. In operations, they of course look at response time, but for capital facility purposes, again, we are looking at population per station. So in the case of EMS, when we look at just the owned 12 stations, it's about 60,000 population. So with total asset value with buildings, land, vehicle, equipment is about $61 million. That divided by the service area population gives us a cost of about $82 per person. And that represents the investment community has made into EMS infrastructure up to this point. So that's sort of our starting point to charge new development. The county is also using general fund for capacity projects, and that's averaging about $1.6 million per year. So that generates a credit against the cost. So the net cost is the difference, ends up being about $40 per person for residential land uses and about $50 for non-residential land uses. Those figures multiplied by residents per unit gives us the calculated fee. So for single family, that gives us about $65. Current fee is about $55, so that's an 18% change. That's below the 50% limit, so county can implement that over a 4-year period. In some of the land uses, there's an increase, like hotel, motel is increasing 88%. So instead of going all the way to $49 per room, it can only go to $39 per room with that 50% cap. And this slide and next slide is showing some comparisons. And here we try to show the study date of the other jurisdictions so you can kind of tell how old their data is, as well as the adoption percentage, which is usually a policy decision. It can be less than 100%. So in the case of this group of counties, the single-family fee is ranging anywhere from $77 to about $345 per home. And these three is ranging from $153 to about $172 per home. And then next few slides shows the summaries for the fire districts by land use. So you can kind of see each district listed in the first column. This first slide is for single family. We are showing full calculated fee, the current fee, and then the maximum fee, which would be the fee that the board will consider adopting. So you can see here the increases are about 46 to 50%. You have the same type of chart for multifamily. This one is ranging anywhere from almost like no increase or a slight decrease to about 50% again, depending on the district. This is an example of retail. Again, these are all at 50% cap. Office is ranging from an increase of 14% to about 50% again at the most. And then industrial, and that's also about almost no change to 50%. So we are here today to answer any questions, get your input. On January 20th, I think the staff will ask the board to direct ordinance to public hearing, and then February 3rd for now is scheduled for adoption hearing. With that, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from members?
Comment? I think it's long overdue. Nice presentation.
Thank you.
If no one else has questions, I have a couple of questions. It seems like retail is the most dramatically impacted, increased. Is there a reason that retail was so heavily?
It's the changes to the demand side.
Can you hear you?
It relates to the changes to the demand side. So we use data from the Institute of Transportation Engineers, trip generation book, hotel, motel, visitor information, and so on. So those variables change more in the case of retail. So that would be the increase. But again, let me go back there. It's all being really kept at 50% of the current rate.
I see the cap. It just seems that retail was dramatically increased compared to.
So when you look at if you are looking at the calculated rate, are you looking at the calculated rate when you say that was increased dramatically?
Well, if you look through all of the districts, and they're all at about 50% the max, and if you compare that to other uses, it appeared to me that retail was singularly being elevated more dramatically than the others, and I didn't know if there was a scientific reason for that or.
Yes, that really, again, relates to how many people at the retail sites compared to what the last study calculated. And so as the data gets updated, we are seeing more persons per square foot at the retail sites throughout the day.
This may be a question for staff. Should BOCC approve this, what happens to people that are already vested? Will they, if they haven't pulled their building permit, when they pull the building permit, subsequently, will they pay at the time that they were vested, or?
Chairman, so I think you heard in this presentation that there's a 90-day period typically for these impact fees before they're effective. And so if the ordinance is adopted, my understanding is that basically there's 90 days before the impact fees become effective. So any building permits that are pulled now or for the first 90 days after the ordinance is adopted would be the old rates before they're updated.
So if I have a building permit, but if I have the zoning and I'm about to get a building permit, and I get it before the 90 days, am I locked in at the lower rate or at the higher? Am I exposed to the higher rate if I get the permit after the 90 days?
Assuming the fee is paid when you pull the permit, which I believe is the case, you would be.
Yeah, impact fees cannot be paid, cannot be collected any sooner than building permit. So if you are on the 89th day of that 90 period, you still get charged at the current schedule, not the increased one.
So you pull your permit before the 90 days, but if it's after 90 days, you pay the higher amount.
Yes.
One additional thing just to remind you or to point out is that because these are all 50%, it's going to be implemented over 4 years. Essentially 12.5% per year for the next 4 years.
That's a good note. If I go to the table, page 2 of 3, there's a table that shows the districts and it shows the uses. And under retail, the uses are bifurcated into less than 40, 40 to 150, 150 up. Yet, despite the fact that they're bifurcated in 3 columns, the amounts are the same for all 3 sizes.
Yes. Again, that's because, so that's part of the new data. Like now the data we are getting is tiered for retail. But because in all cases, the increase is more than 50%, and currently there's only one retail number, all of them default back to 50% higher than that. So essentially you end up not having any tiers. It's going to be single category.
So do we need 3 categories going forward, or is it just another level?
I think basically we are checking to make sure that none of the categories should be lower than 50%. So if one category was increasing 20%, we didn't want to necessarily increase that automatically to 50%. So that's sort of checked. But because they are all increasing more than that, in reality, county will continue to have a single retail rate.
So in the future, having 3 categories, it may be beneficial if one category is not as dramatically impacted.
Right.
Thank you for that. I have no further questions. Anyone from the county want to expand on this, or are you guys good?
I think we're good unless you have any additional questions.
Okay. Well, this is a separate agenda item, so do I have a motion from the LPA on agenda item 4A?
I make a motion to recommend approval.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Let's go to agenda item 4B. Agenda item 4B is MPD threshold amendments to Chapter 34 to eliminate minimum thresholds to provide greater development flexibility. I have 2 cards from people that would like to speak on agenda item 4B, and we'll give you that right in a few moments. Anthony?
Good morning. For the record, Anthony Rodriguez with the zoning section of the Department of Community Development. The next 2 amendments this morning are relatively simple amendments. The first one we're going to talk about this morning is the changes to the mixed-use plan development thresholds, which are established in Land Development Code Section 34940. Today's code has minimum requirements for square footage or residential dwelling units, depending on the type of use you're proposing in a mixed-use plan development. What this ends up doing in the long run is it kind of ties developers' hands at time of development in terms of being able to respond to market changes as demand changes for square footage or residential dwelling unit types. And so what staff is proposing to do is to strike those minimums and to allow essentially a group of uses to be developed within a mixed-use plan development without having to adhere to any minimums in terms of square footage or residential density. Back in 2005, there were higher minimum thresholds for mixed-use plan developments. Those were changed in '05 to lower those a little bit, and so this is kind of in keeping with that trend to provide that greater flexibility. The two committees that have heard this already, EROC and the Land Development Code Advisory Committee, did recommend approval of these amendments with no changes. And that's kind of the summary of the amendment, so I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
LPA, any questions for Anthony? Dawn?
So I support removal of the threshold and the increased flexibility. My question, though, is about use of the word may. I just feel like that maybe could be interpreted as it's not a requirement to have multiple uses. It just says you may contain multiple uses. So does that mean an MPD could possibly be all residential?
There would be no reason for it in that case, and actually EROC brought up the same question. If it's a may, there's no requirement to mix the uses, right? However, there are other plan development avenues, whether it be a commercial plan development if you're considering just a commercial development program, or a residential plan development in the case of just a residential. There's nothing that would preclude a developer or an applicant in a rezoning to request an MPD and propose only residential development, though in terms of, from staff's perspective, I don't really see a need or a reason to do that. But it does allow, what this kind of allows is this is going to allow an initial entitlement to occur, whatever that development program looks like, and then the Land Development Code provides administrative processes for amending plan developments. And so one of the criteria that an applicant would have to meet in that context would be to be required to demonstrate that there's no increase in density or intensity. And that kind of takes many forms, especially in terms of intensity. Intensity has a variety of different ways that we measure that from staff's perspective. And so what it does is if there's an instance with an MPD that proposes only residential and market demand dictates, non-residential square footage, there's an opportunity for an applicant to amend their entitlements to introduce residential square footage as long as they can demonstrate that there's no intensity increase in terms of off-site impacts. So think trip generation, utility demands, things of that nature.
Thank you.
Follow-up question to that. So the inverse of that, let's say that instead of doing a mix of uses, it was decided to do all commercial, and it was determined by staff that that was an intensity change too much to be reviewed administratively. Would that be reviewed by HEX and not go to VOCC? Is that the process?
So it really all ties to the intensity definition, right? So the HEX does not have the ability to approve intensity increases, much like staff, and so in that instance where an intensity is being increased, that would still have to go to the Board of County Commissioners for approval. But there's an opportunity that's presented through these proposed changes that allows you to kind of offset some of the intensity increases through the analysis that is put forth as part of the support for that, an application of that nature. That answer your question? Okay, sure.
Anyone else?
No.
Thank you, Anthony.
Yep. You're welcome.
All right, we have two members of the public here. I'm going to ask Mr. Freeman if you'd like to speak at the podium. As is customary, there's a 3-minute.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Alan Freeman. We develop property throughout Lee County, mostly in the southern part of the county. This amendment applies to some things that we've been doing to amend Section 940 for this mixed-use plan development issue. When we come in for zoning, it may be a different market than when we actually effectuate the plan. So that's basically the reason why I support this. At the time of zoning, all of the impacts, including what land uses we propose, square footage limits, traffic impacts, and other impacts are evaluated, and we're not asking to change any of that. In fact, one of our projects, which is commercial and industrial, We are going to end up probably doing considerably less square footage, so less impacts, but the market really is it's an arterial road, and it's mostly commercial in that particular case. So we deal with the customers as they come to us, and again, they're consistent and compatible with what's been evaluated originally. So that's really the reason. I don't have any further comments, and we support this. Makes life a little bit simpler, but doesn't really change evaluations of intensity and square footage and those types of issues.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Amy?
Good morning, board members. For the record, Amy Thibault with Retzel. I'm also here to speak in favor of this proposed amendment to the Land Development Code. I would like to incorporate exactly what Mr. Freeman and Mr. Rodriguez have already said. And a couple of points that I would like to make is that, when we have MPDs, to build on what Mr. Freeman said, oftentimes we're coming in with a mix of uses, potentially commercial and industrial, commercial and residential. Market demand at any point in time can change. But another potentially encouraging a mix of uses down the road. Just to kind of answer that question as to why we're not doing a single-use PD for some of these, that would be one element of it. And another question that we were asked by a couple of the other boards was, is this going to eliminate the thresholds altogether? No. MPDs, all PDs will still be, evaluated on a site-specific basis. So to the extent that a new MPD does need some sort of threshold, that can be applied on a site-specific basis. It's just not mandated by the LDC. So we're here simply to give a little bit more flexibility and give some of these existing improved MPDs a path forward to building out in terms of market demand without having to go back to the BOCC. So thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone else from the public? I see none. It closes the public comment section of item 4B. Members of the LPA, thoughts, comments, motion?
Make a motion to approve 4B.
I'll second it.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you. Moving forward, agenda item 4C is in Charlie, floodplain management and building code amendments. Amendments to Chapter 6 to remove redundant and procedural language, remove regulations addressed by Florida Building Code, including required statutory language for condo co-op building repairs and complete other general cleanup. Mr. Rodriguez.
Again, Anthony Rodriguez for the record. This is a relatively simple cleanup type amendment. There's a lot of redundant and duplicative language within the LDC, specifically in Chapter 6 as it relates to building code and FEMA compliance and compliance with other state law. In addition, the structure of the Department of Community Development has changed somewhat, and so some of the title terminology used in Chapter 6 is also outdated. And so what this package does is kind of updates all that to today's language, today's standards, today's requirements. That's kind of the long and short of it. I don't want to belabor the point. I'm happy to answer any specific questions that the agency has.
Any questions? Any questions for Mr. Rodriguez?
No.
I'm going to do a quick scan of my notes. I have no further questions.
Okay, thank you.
I'm all in favor of removing barriers, such as simplifying the mixed plan development, cleaning this stuff up. So good job to staff, good job for BOCC for asking you to do this.
I agree, and redundancies is where you get the problems, because if they're slightly different, that's where it becomes confusing.
I'll make a motion to approve as stated item C.
Thank you, Don. Second.
Second.
Thank you, Ray. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
As I look at our agenda, I believe that concludes unless somebody else has something else. And if they don't, then
I would like to just make a comment to my colleague here, Mr. Blacksmith, whose final meeting, and like to thank you for your opinions, which have always been on topic. And thanks for your support.
My opinion matters.
I haven't always agreed with density increases, but appreciate that.
well, Hank, thanks for taking the time to call that out. Ray, I'll echo that.
It's been enjoyable. I enjoy being involved. One thing for the next term, anybody that comes in, I don't like the arrangement in here. I don't like the speaker behind me. I don't like not seeing who you're looking.
So that's why you're quitting?
Yes.
So I appreciate your preparation, and I appreciate the temerity you have to speak to the issues regardless of their popularity. So you'll be missed, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Ray.
A little round for Ray. Anyone else? Well, as
That'll be in the papers. I control the board.
then as an alumni of the nation's #1 ranked college football team,
Oh, gee.
and Big Ten champions, Indiana University.
This isn't on the minutes, is it?
It should be in the minutes. Let the record reflect. For 37 years, we beat Ohio State.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, by the way.
I move to adjourn. Anyone else? Second. We're adjourned.
you.
We're adjourned.
Happy holidays.